On the surface, the cruise industry looks like the ultimate American success story. Floating cities, unlimited shrimp, a license to print money. But if you look at their balance sheets in 2026, you don't see a success story. You see a crime scene. The first thing you need to understand is that the modern cruise industry isn't in the tourism business anymore. They are in the debt management business. Following the global shutdown of the early 2020s, the major cruise lines accumulated over $70 billion in debt. That's more than the GDP of some small countries. To stay afloat, they are currently running what financial experts are whispering is a Ponzi-adjacent scheme. They build bigger, flashier ships using massive loans, hoping the ticket sales from these new giants will pay off the interest on the old ships. It's a house of cards. And like any house of cards, when the wind blows, it doesn't just wobble, it collapses. So how do they keep this sinking ship from going under financially? Enter you. To the executives in Miami, you are not a guest, you are a revenue unit. And once you step onto that gangway, you are entering a masterful psychological trap known as a captive economy. Think about it. That $400 ticket deal you grabbed online, that barely covers their fuel cost. They lose money on the ticket. They need to make it back, and they need to make it back fast. This is why modern ships are designed by behavioral psychologists, not just naval architects. Have you ever noticed that to get to the dining hall, you have to walk through the casino or the high-end jewelry stores? That's not an accident. That's a funnel. There are no clocks in the shopping districts. The lighting is artificially controlled to keep you awake and spending. They cut you off from the outside world with exorbitant Wi-Fi prices, so that your only reality is their reality. They upsell you on specialty dining, because the free buffet food quality has been intentionally lowered, just enough to make you crave a better meal. You think you're on vacation, but you're actually inside a floating Skinner box designed to extract every last cent from your pocket before you hit the shore. In the industry, they call this onboard yield. In 2026, the average passenger spends nearly 300% more onboard than the cost of their original ticket. Bottled water, $8. Want to sit in the adult-only area? That's a pass. Room service, service fee. Even the art auctions you see on board are often rigged, selling worthless prints to tipsy passengers who don't have Google to check the real prices. They are squeezing the lemon until it's dry. But here is the scary part. Despite ripping you off at every turn, they are still barely breaking even. The desperation is palpable, and when a corporation becomes desperate for cash, moral boundaries start to disappear. If they are willing to manipulate your psychology just to sell you a drink, imagine what corners they are cutting when it comes to the things you can't see. You see, financial fraud is just the tip of the iceberg. When you are billions of dollars in debt, you don't just cut costs on food or laundry. You start looking for legal loopholes. You start looking for ways to operate outside the system. This brings us to the most terrifying secret of the open ocean. The reason these ships can get away with this financial robbery is the same reason they can get away with much, much worse. It turns out, the moment that ship sails 12 miles away from the U.S. coast, the laws of the United States no longer apply. You aren't just in a financial trap anymore. You are entering a lawless void. Take a look at the stern of almost any major cruise ship. The hull might say Miami, the company might be listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and the passengers might be American citizens. But the flag? It's likely from Panama, Liberia, or the Bahamas. Most people think this is just a boring corporate tax loophole. They think, oh, the billionaires are just saving a few dollars. If only it were that simple. This is what the industry calls a flag of convenience, and it is the single most dangerous legal gray area on the planet. When you step onto a ship flying a Bahamian flag, legally speaking, you are no longer in the United States. You have stepped onto foreign soil. The moment that ship crosses the 12-mile mark into international waters, the U.S. Constitution, your civil rights, and even OSHA safety regulations, they evaporate. You are now subject to the laws of a tiny island nation that relies on the cruise company for its GDP. Do you really think they are going to enforce the law against their biggest paymaster? Let's play out a scenario. It's 2 a.m. You or a loved one is assaulted on board, or maybe you witness a crime. Your instinct is to call 911, but out here, 911 doesn't exist. So who do you call? You call the ship's security. And here's the terrifying conflict of interest. The police on board are on the cruise line's payroll. Their job isn't to serve and protect you. Their job is to protect the company from liability. FBI jurisdiction in international waters is extremely limited and complicated. Unless a crime involves a U.S. national and meets very specific criteria, federal agents often can't or won't get involved until the ship docks days later. By then, the crime scene has been cleaned, evidence has been lost, and witnesses have disembarked. It is a legal Wild West. The captain is effectively the judge, jury, and mayor of this floating city, and history shows they prefer to keep things quiet rather than cause a PR scandal. And then there is the ultimate nightmare, disappearances. The industry uses a very clinical term for this, man overboard. Since the year 2000, hundreds of people have vanished from cruise ships, gone, without a trace. When someone disappears, the cruise lines have a standard playbook. They often claim it was a suicide or an accidental fall. They control the narrative because they control the surveillance footage. There are countless stories of families begging for CCTV footage, only to be told the cameras weren't working in that specific area at that specific time. Without a body, there is no autopsy. Without an autopsy, there is no murder investigation. The ship keeps moving, the buffet keeps serving, and the case is closed before the sun even comes up. It is the perfect crime scene because the ocean swallows the evidence. If this is how little legal protection you have as a paying customer, someone who is shelling out thousands of dollars, imagine the situation for the people who actually keep the ship running. If the laws don't protect the guests, they certainly don't protect the workers. Below the waterline, hidden from your view, is a world that looks less like a vacation and more like a Victorian workhouse. The flags of convenience don't just hide crimes, they legalize modern-day slavery. And that is where the real horror begins. When you walk down the grand staircase, you are greeted by smiles. The bartender knows your name. The housekeeper leaves chocolates on your pillow. You think they are happy to serve you, but what you are seeing is a performance, a survival tactic. Below the waterline, on decks 0, 1, and 2, exists a hidden city that passengers are forbidden to see. If the upper decks are a 5-star hotel, the lower decks are a Victorian workhouse. Because these ships fly foreign flags, U.S. labor laws like minimum wage, overtime pay, or the 40-hour work week do not exist here. I've analyzed the contract. The reality is brutal. We are talking about 12 to 14-hour shifts, 7 days a week, for 8 to 10 months straight. No weekends, no holidays. If you are sick, you work. If you are tired, you work. Because if you don't, there are 10 other people waiting at the port to take your bunk. But here's the real kicker, the economics of it. Cruise lines intentionally recruit from developing nations, the Philippines, Indonesia, India, Eastern Europe. Why? Because they can get away with paying them peanuts. Some cleaning staff and waiters earn a base salary of as little as $500 to $800 a month. Do the math. If you work 300 hours a month, that's barely $2 an hour. And it gets worse. Many of these workers had to pay recruitment fees to shadowy agencies just to get the job. They step onto the ship already in debt. They are working off a loan, stuck on a floating metal island, unable to quit because they can't afford the plane ticket home. In any other industry, we would call this indentured servitude. On a cruise ship, they call it international employment opportunities. Life on board is strictly segregated. It's a floating caste system. The officers, usually from Western countries, eat in the passenger buffets and have their own cabins. But the crew, they live in windowless steel boxes, often 4 to a room, vibrating constantly from the engine noise. Isolation is the real killer. Internet on board is sold at a premium. A crew member earning $600 a month can't afford $20 for an hour of Wi-Fi to call their children, so they are cut off. Missed birthdays, missed funerals, missed lives. They exist solely to make sure your margarita glass is never empty. This level of exploitation takes a toll. The industry fights tooth and nail to keep suicide statistics secret, but insider reports are terrifying. Crew members call it jumping. When the isolation, the debt, and the exhaustion become too much, some just step off the edge. During the pandemic, thousands of crew members were trapped on these ships for months without pay, forbidden to dock. That was the moment the mask slipped. We saw the industry for what it really is. A machine that treats human beings as disposable components. If a blender breaks, you replace it. If a dishwasher burns out, you replace it. Now you might be thinking, if they treat their own workers with such disregard for human life, surely they must care about the ocean that gives them their business. Wrong. If they are willing to exploit people to save a few dollars, wait until you see what they are doing to the planet. Because the fuel burning in those engines, it's not just dirty, it's illegal on land. And what they dump into the water at night will make you think twice about ever swimming in the ocean again. If you visit any cruise line's website today, you will see tabs dedicated to sustainability and protecting the oceans. They sell you the beauty of the planet as their product. But this is what we call greenwashing, because the reality is, the cruise industry is arguably the single most polluting tourism sector on Earth. Let's talk about what powers these floating cities. You might think they run on the same diesel as a truck or a ferry. They don't. They run on something called heavy fuel oil, or as it's known in the industry, bunker fuel. It is the bottom of the barrel, literally. After the refineries extract the gasoline for your car, the jet fuel for planes, and the diesel for trucks, what's left is a thick, toxic tar-like sludge. That is bunker fuel. It is so thick that it has to be heated up just to flow through the engine pipes. And when it burns, it releases sulfur, nitrogen oxide, and heavy metals into the air you breathe while jogging on the upper deck. Let's put this into perspective with a number that should terrify you. Environmental studies have shown that a single large cruise ship can emit as much particulate matter as 1 million cars in a single day. Some estimates for sulfur sulfur emissions go as high as 13 million cars. Think about that. You are paying thousands of dollars to breathe air that in some port cities is actually dirtier than the smog in downtown Beijing. And it's not just the air, it's the water. Cruise ships generate massive amounts of waste, oily bilge water, sewage, chemicals. Processing this waste properly costs money. Dumping it into the ocean? That's free. For decades, engineers on ships have used something called a magic pipe. It's a secret bypass hose that allows them to flush untreated oil and toxic waste directly into the ocean, bypassing the ship's sensors that are supposed to record pollution. They do this at night, or in the middle of the ocean where no one is watching. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a proven fact. Carnival Corporation, the biggest player in the game, pleaded guilty to environmental crimes and was fined $40 million. Princess Cruises? Fined. Royal Caribbean? Fined. It happens again and again. But here's the cynical truth. These fines don't stop them. To a company making billions in revenue, a $40 million fine is just a rounding error. It's the cost of doing business. It is literally cheaper for them to dump the waste and pay the fine than it is to properly dispose of it for years. They treat the ocean like a toilet because it's profitable. But while they are busy cutting corners on fuel and waste disposal to save a buck, they are also cutting corners on something much closer to home. If they don't care about the ocean and they don't care about the crew, what makes you think they care about keeping the ship itself from falling apart? Cheap fuel destroys engines, neglect destroys safety, and as we approach 2026, with debts piling up and fleets aging, we are seeing a terrifying trend. Mechanical failures are skyrocketing. The floating city is becoming a floating time bomb. And in our final chapter, we're going to look at why the next big disaster isn't a matter of if, but when. Imagine being stranded in the middle of the ocean. No power, no air conditioning, toilets overflowing, food rotting in the heat. This isn't a scene from a disaster movie. This is becoming the new normal. As we move through the mid-2020s, we are seeing a spike in what the industry calls technical incidents, engine room fires, power blackouts, propulsion failures. Why is this happening? Because when a company is drowning in debt, the first budget they slash is maintenance. It's called deferred maintenance. Instead of replacing an aging engine part, they patch it up. They put a band-aid on a bullet hole and hope it holds until the next fiscal quarter. These ships are becoming floating time bombs, pushed to their limits by executives who care more about stock prices than seaworthiness. But nothing tells the story of the industry's collapse better than this image. This is the ship graveyard in Aliaga, Turkey. Traditionally, a cruise ship is built to last 30 or 40 years. But recently, we've seen ships as young as 15 or 18 years being rammed onto these beaches to be scrapped. Why kill a ship so young? Because they are worth more as scrap metal than they are as functioning businesses. The giants of the sea are dying. The business model that worked in the 90s and 2000s is broken. Rising fuel costs, environmental regulations, and a smarter generation of travelers who refuse to support unethical practices. It's the perfect storm. The dinosaurs are going extinct, and we are watching the meteor hit in slow motion. So let's look at the full picture we've painted today. You have a financial system designed to bleed you dry, a legal loophole that strips you of your rights, a workforce trapped in modern slavery, an environmental footprint that destroys the very oceans they sail on, and a fleet of ships that are physically falling apart. The cruise ship deception isn't just about a bad vacation. It's about a broken system. They sell you the illusion of luxury, but the reality is cheap, dangerous, and unethical. I'm not telling you never to travel. The world is beautiful, and you should see it. But maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't see it from the deck of a floating shopping mall that treats humans like cargo in the ocean like a landfill. The power's in your wallet. As long as we keep buying the tickets, they will keep selling the lie. But now you know the truth, and you can't say you weren't warned. If this deep dive opened your eyes, share this video. The algorithm hates the truth, so I need your help to get this out there. I'm Channel Name. Stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next investigation.